Hello again, everyone. Welcome to Midwest Ag This Week. This will be our final show, which is being eliminated to make way for other programs. We'll spend the next few minutes showing you some very interesting things and highlights of the last 8 months of programs. We'll venture into agronomy, farm management, technology. We'll even talk about spring planting and reintroduce you to some great people in agriculture. And it all starts right now.
Welcome to Midwest Ag This Week with host Stu Ellis.
In the past 8 months in Midwest Ag, we've covered some very important agronomic issues for farmers.
You learned that U of I researcher Zhang Ji has been able to fingerprint the kind of nitrogen in the tile water from cornfields.
So its related question is where those nitrogen is coming from. It's coming from fertilizer, just like you say, from fertilizers or from the mineralization process of soil itself. That means the breakdown of soil organic matter and release nitrogen. So the technique we use is called isotope probing. So the idea is different nitrogen from different sources, they have different molecular compounds. If we can measure those compounds in river nitrogen or tile drainage nitrogen, we can have a really good idea about it. I think the first step is to better partition or the percentage of nitrogen coming from fertilizer and from mineralization. Without knowing this information, we are kind of tired to kind of develop best practice for like fertilization rates or when to apply fertilizers.
You heard strip till advocate Jason Webster of Precision Planting tell you what not to do.
I need to have that strip till come in with a shank and we lift and fracture and we remove that compaction so we're not limiting root size and things like that. We want to make sure our roots don't have that compaction to get down to water and nutrients. So I'm using a mole knife, deep shank. We go 10 by 10. We'd say 10 inches deep to get the lift and fracture, and I want to make a strip 10 inches wide, and that'll generally do a nice job for us in the fall. What we've learned is I can't do that in the spring because generally we're too wet underneath, and what'll happen is if we run a mole knife in wet conditions too deep, we'll end up with an air pocket the size of a softball behind that shank.
As you fight tar spot in corn this year, Wisconsin plant pathologist Damon Smith told you that humidity will determine when you should spray a fungicide.
In time, but the window of opportunity really is in that VT to kind of R3 window.
What's it going to be in 2022?
I wish I knew. I've been telling folks I don't have that crystal ball, but it's all going to come down to paying attention to the weather, especially as we approach the tassel timing. That's really what drives this epidemic, and if we keep an eye on that, and we're starting to see a lot of leaf wetness, especially extended periods of leaf wetness at night, that drives this epidemic. So we just got to pay attention and scout in the field.
And Illinois crop scientist Steve Moose told you that he's developing ways for your corn to tell you what it needs.
Yeah, we hope that the plant will be actually a living sensor that will tell in a very fast way what it's sensing in the nitrogen world or its water status and nutrients, and so that then farmers might be able to do a faster corrective action. Instead of finding out before it's too late, they might get an early warning.
And what would that warning come in the form of?
So it might be that the leaf might change a color, or it might send some kind of digital signal that then a rover or a drone or some other kind of automated system could pick up.
Midwest Ag has covered a wide range of farm management and marketing topics over its brief life.
In early October, we were emphasizing the critical shortage of fertilizer with the help of President Kevin Johnson of the Illinois Fertilizer and Chemical Association, who said his members were trying to find fertilizer wherever they could.
A lot of guys are just trying to find where that production is and trying to buy it. Even though they don't probably love the price that they're paying for that at that point, right now they're just trying to get tons in the building so they know they got stuff locked in for next spring.
So what should a farmer be doing?
Have a good conversation, especially on the fertilizer stuff. What you guys have a plan of attack. What are you guys thinking? What are you thinking on planting acres? What do you need for crop inputs, but also the chemical side of stuff? Have a good discussion with your retailer or your chemical supplier and say, here's what I'm looking at. Here's what my true intent. I don't think guys have always had that conversation this early in the game. You have to have this conversation now.
And regarding farm management, Illinois professor of regenerative agriculture, Emily Heaton, introduced you to that new concept. What is regenerative agriculture? You may have heard of it, you may not have heard of it, but I've got an answer for you. Emily, what is regenerative agriculture?
Well, to some, regenerative agriculture is just the latest buzzword in a long line of concepts you might be familiar with, like sustainable agriculture. But another way to think about it, for those of us in Central Illinois particularly, is that it's agriculture that regenerates the natural and human resources on which we all depend. So what do I mean by that? Well, the natural resources, of course, would be a clean air, healthy soils, clean water, and the human resources are thriving rural communities with good schools. And of course, if you want to talk to, farmers, it has to be economically viable, right?
At the end of the year, we took you to Brazil to see how the drought impacted crops and the market. Ag economist Joanna Calusi visited with viewers via a Zoom call from Puerto Alegre, Brazil.
Worst situation for corn is in the northwest of Rio Grande do Sul, as you can see in the images. I took this image on December 19. The region is one of the leading agriculture areas in the Rio Grande do Sul, and the losses in the corn fields are around 50%. Since late October, the first corn crop areas have faced hot and dry conditions in parts of Rio Grande do Sul. Right now, the estimate is that about 50% of the state's corn area is at the risk because of the drought. There is a concern also regarding the soybeans, that despite being more resistant than corn, it also needs rain. The situation is not good for soybeans.
Coming up, we'll talk about spring planting.
Welcome back to Midwest Ag This Week.
Earlier this year, when it was time to think about going to the field, Midwest Ag visited with some familiar names for their advice on dealing with an unfriendly spring.
Dad and Grandpa always planted corn before beans, but that's reversing. And a well-known influencer, Greg Sauter, offered a suggestion to a one-planter operation.
What should they do? Well, for me, I've watched early bean planting for now 5 years, and it's real. That's 10 to 15 bushel is a real number. Can it freeze off? Absolutely. Can it get snow on them? Sure. They're very tough. You can lose some stand and still maintain it. So for me, I would plant beans first, for sure the first week. If ground is fit, and then for Tremont, Illinois, if it's April 1st, I'm going to be in and going. We know that early planting increases flowering, which increases pod set. So lower pods, we're talking pods down right on the ground. So that family of one planter is going to have to make a decision. Are we going to plant corn this week, or are we going to plant beans? The first week out, we're going to plant beans.
Another early soybean planter, Chris Ayler of Ayler Brothers Seed at Thomasboro, usually does not wait until April 1st. He was planting in mid-March.
Absolutely. And this, I've taken the approach in previous years of side by side and showing the advantages of early planting. And I think we've driven that message home. Our 10-year average is right around 7 bushel advantage versus later planting. We've seen years where it's 10 bushel. So this year I took the approach of, let's go to the ultra early side of things, because we've seen some March and very early April dates showing some advantage even above that late April date. So taking the high yield approach on this trial this time.
Another advocate of early planting for both corn and beans is Illinois crop physiologist Dr. Fred Bilo, who's been bollocksed by the weather this year and is faunching at the bit.
I'm not worried yet.
When are you going to start getting worried?
If it was Mother's Day, I'd be worried. I think, obviously we're worried about the weather, but we still got a lot of time. And when it comes to corn, I can tell you that rapid, uniform emergence is pretty important. And so sometimes early planting isn't as advantageous as we think, if that crop sits in the ground for a long time. So I've seen times when we planted on Mother's Day, crop comes up in 5 days, pretty uniform, really good yield potential.
All right. So for the guys that haven't planted corn, just like you, that are out there concerned about delayed planting, are they going to be okay with the new crop genetics?
You know, I think they are, and not only did we have the new genetics with a lot of decent seed treatments, but a lot of farmers have auto steer. Think of how fast they can put that crop in.
Matt, I have a feeling you have auto steer. I don't know how much crop you have put in yet. Have you gotten planted at all?
No, we haven't put anything in the ground. We're actually going to start today. So here on Friday, we're going to start putting some corn, hopefully beans in the ground over the weekend. Hopeful that we don't get a whole lot of rain there on Sunday. It seems like the forecasts keep changing, so it's tough to tell what to expect. But you know, the ground's working beautiful in places, especially where you've got pattern tile. And so we feel like if the ground's going to be working awfully good, we need to start trying to take advantage of this window.
Okay, and for those of you who have watched our program over the last 8 months, you know this is Matt Bennett of agmarket.net. And Matt, we appreciate you and your colleagues and Kurt Kimmel of Bates Commodities being with us every week and helping us with understanding what's driving the market. Anything particular that you want to visit with the folks about today? What's happened in the last week, or what's going to happen this next week?
You know, we gave back a little bit at times this week. You saw December corn close about 7.25. You know, given that type of price structure, that's a pretty darn good price for any of us on any year. And so in Central Illinois, there's a lot of $7 cash bids. You know, you look at November beans, and No 22 beans still closed over $15 this week on the board. I tell you what, both of those price levels, in my opinion, are price levels we need to at least be locking in worst case scenarios. You want to keep your flexibility still, because there's no question that we're early in the year. But at the same time, these are price levels we don't typically get to lock in. So I certainly wouldn't be throwing cold water on 7.25 and $15.
That's right. And a lot of the drivers that have pushed those higher, we don't really see any end to them, but we still have to manage our risk.
Yeah, absolutely. You got to manage price risk. You've got more, risk on the table with these price levels than what we typically do. So by all means, that necessitates that you do something about it.
Matt, we appreciate you breaking away from your planter here today, and we'll let you get back to farming. And I know that's where your heart and soul is. So we'll see you down the road. Thank you, sir.
Thanks, bud.
Thank you. We'll be back with a look at some technology right after this. When Midwest Ag this week began last September and showed farmers the latest technology, it was very appropriate that our first show was broadcast immediately after that Farm Progress show.
Sarah Waltner, the general manager of Raven Technology, explained the concept of DOT, the autonomous implement using GPS to do a wide range of functions on the farm.
U-shaped power platform, and so what we have really done with it is we have done a lot. You know, our strength is in the technology and in the solution set, and so we have done a lot to harden the design and to harden the technology on that. The other thing that we have done is we are using our full suite of technology on the implements that go on that machine, and what we have done within our technology is to further automate aspects of what we were already really good at to be set up for not having a person in the cab, to be set up for not having a user interface.
What other implements can you put on DOT beside a sprayer and a seeder and a sprayer?
Yeah, so those are the three we've done so far, but if you think about it, you know, it is not a pulling platform right now, and so future iterations absolutely could be, but this one is not designed to pull. And so you could think of other things, you know, like we've had a lot of questions about tillage, we've had a lot of questions about even rolling and other things like that, and so, you know, it could be set up for a planter at some point. Those future iterations, you know, whenever you think about what all do you hook behind a tractor, there really isn't a reason why it couldn't be hooked and connected to a U-shaped platform platform like what we have today. Obviously, the one as it exists today is not for pulling. It's not for all applications within row crops, but certainly future iterations can be.
The main attraction of the Farm Progress Show's field demonstrations, and Midwest Ag was at the combine demos. The primary popularity of the Farm Progress Show is not necessarily the immaculate equipment posing among mums and evergreens and wood chips, but instead it's the field demonstrations every day, harvesting and tillage primarily. Crowds of farmers will push against safety ropes while an announcer describes the features of a given combine, including harvesting and unloading capacity, type and size of the internal components, and the availability of headers. Once the announcer stops and the signal is given for the combine operator, he takes off through the field. In prior days, farmers would get to check behind the combine swath and inspect for corn kernels that may have been unharvested or otherwise lost in the shelling process. Because of injury concerns, there's a wide safety distancing, and it would be difficult to find the swath of an individual combine that one might be interested in purchasing. Among the primary attractions in the harvesting demonstrations were the new Deere X9 and the Fendt, both of which have been developed and released to the market since the COVID pandemic started. Farmers have not had the chance to see either in operation in the field, and indicated they wanted to see them run with 16 row headers and nearly 500 bushel grain tanks. Many Midwest Ag programs contained a segment called Shop Talk, and late in November, viewers learned about putting tracks on a combine to finish up harvest. On our Shop Talk segment today, we're visiting with Eric Steers, who farms between Bellflower and Farmer City, and who just put a new set of tracks on his combine. And this was something that was, you're either going to get through the field or not, kind of muddy up in some parts up here.
Yes, after the recent rains a couple weeks ago, I decided that I needed to do something to be able to get through the fields, and went online and found a dealer out of Kansas, Preferred Equipment, contacted them, and they were able to get me a set of Susi tracks within 24 hours.
All right. Now, how did you put them on? That's my question. Did you have to crawl under the combine and lift it up and have one of your hired men or somebody push them on for you?
Well, actually, it was rather simple. We jacked it up, took the duals off, and these actually bolt right on to where the tires were. And so the installation process was probably 2 or 3 hours with 3 guys. It was rather quick and simple, to be quite honest.
Coming up, a final visit with some real luminaries. In the last 8 months, Midwest Ag has introduced you to some very, very special people.
Philanthropist Howard Buffett shared what motivated his $9 million gift to build an FFA center south of Decatur.
For me, the love I have for farming, it's probably the most fun thing I've done in Decatur. I mean, if you think about Decatur, this is the greatest ag story I know, because you went to an urban school, over 50% color and over 50% female, and you have 435 of these students. Next year they anticipate 500 involved in an agricultural program. Where has that ever happened before?
A Ukrainian farmer told you that he was certain that he and his colleagues would be planting spring crops this year.
So Ukrainian farmers will be planting a crop this year, even if the war is going on. Yes. 100%, yes. And even with the infrastructure destroyed, think about how will this crop get to the Black Sea in order to be shipped to sell?
We have a lot of seeding material in Ukraine. For your understanding, it's not only corn can be planted. It's no problem. So soybeans, we have huge quantity of soybeans which we can plant. Even if we don't have corn, no problem.
U.S. Ambassador Greg Dowd, who negotiated the Phase 1 trade agreement with China, told viewers something never previously revealed.
The agreement was that what China was going to do had to be economic in terms of purchases. And so the question, I would answer your question this way: have I seen, when I was at USTR or since China do something in agriculture in terms of their agricultural purchases from the United States or from other countries that was uneconomic? And the answer is no. Everything that I've seen them do was very economic, very logical in terms of their procurement and what they've done. And that was always part of the discussion, is China was not going to go out of its way to spend more money to buy U.S. soybeans versus Brazilian soybeans.
Midwest Ag introduced you to a lady who sees the animal world different than any other, Dr. Temple Grandin.
Cattle handling, that has really improved. You know, the Cattlemen's Association's been working on workshops. That's improved. I'm a bit concerned right now about pushing animals too hard. We breed an animal just to make meat, and then you end up with leg problems. It's very important in cattle that you select bulls with good feet and legs, because if they're too straight or their ankles are collapsed, they walk on the dew claws, they're going to be lame. Okay. We have got to we have to look at what is the optimum, not the maximum, in genetic selection of cattle and pigs.
And you met another young lady, Amy Bradford of Bloomington, who was the national chair for this spring's National Agriculture Day.
It really is an honor to be able to chair this committee and be able to communicate about agriculture and all the things that we have going on in D.C. on March 22nd.
How did you get involved in this?
Well, I'm part of, it's called the Agricultural Council of America, and our primary goal is to increase awareness about agriculture in society and the world, and the value that it brings to everyone, and what farmers and agribusinesses do to produce food, fuel, and fiber. And one of the main activities we do is this National Ag Day event in Washington, D.C. on the 22nd of March.
And that wraps up Midwest Ag This Week for today and forever. We hope that you've benefited from some of the information you've heard over the last 8 months. From my heart to your house, thank you so much for watching.